Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. Confused. Because you lost, you idiot. Luffy said, while blood still poured from his wound, which hadn't closed. It hurts. Help me, make it stop hurting. Weevil said, begging, as his screams began to wake the old woman, still chained up as well. What? Where am I? She murmured, trying to move, but she was restrained. Luffy just picked them up. One in each hand. Before his black wings sprouted from his back. He took off, flying with both of them screaming. Luffy went to the Wano area, flying past all the kingdoms before heading to Onigashima, where there were still many groups celebrating on the island in the last few days. The fight between Lamy and Reiju was happening in the distance, already going on for days without any sign of stopping, as explosions were still going off. In any case, Luffy just placed Weevil on the ground, while the ship remained in his pocket until that moment, pulling it out before the Black Pearl hit the ceiling of Onigashima with people greeting Luffy and him boarding the ship. His den-den-mushi rang immediately. Upon answering, it was his sister. Luffy, we saw the island arrive. Is Ace on it? Lucy exclaimed, immediately asking about the brother she hadn't seen since the war. I was told you were going to fetch them. I even wanted to come along, but since it was supposed to be quick, you didn't even bother inviting me, huh? She complained. Yeah, he's here. Where are you? Luffy asked, since she was out of his hockey range. I'm in Dressrosa. She said. That explained why he couldn't sense her. After all, she was in another kingdom a bit far from Onigashima. Even though they were in a large archipelago, each piece of land was an island, a kingdom of different sizes, but all gigantic land masses that could stretch for hundreds of kilometers each. We're taking care of my nephews, your kids. She added. They're asking about you. I'll visit them as soon as I can. We still have plenty of time. Luffy said, as he still needed to handle all the matters of the islands and everything that was affecting each one of them. In a way, he still didn't have time to go and be with his family, no matter how much he wanted to. Lucy then headed to Sphinx, after hanging up the den-den-mushi. Meanwhile, Luffy was alone on the ship, deep in thought about what to do. Luffy. Chopper appeared at that moment, seeing Luffy arrive after flying out to look for Usopp. He was finally conscious and doing well. Luffy smiled at his friend. Someone make the pain stop. Weevil kept murmuring, and Chopper finally noticed him. What? Someone's hurt over there. Quick, call a doctor. Ah, I'm a doctor. Chopper started running until he became self-aware. Luffy needed him, but his den-den-mushi rang once more. Upon answering, he heard Monet's voice. Captain. His secretary said. Were you able to handle everything, Monet? Luffy asked. Yes. All the resource requests we sent to the kingdoms are being executed. They've already started sending supplies to Wano since yesterday. She replied. After all, it had only been a day since they'd sent the request to help the kingdom of Wano. Great. Keep checking the stockpiles and also assist Tori. She'll be responsible for Wano from now on, until her brother returns. Luffy said. He hoped the Red Scabbards would also assist, but he knew none of them specialized in administrating an entire kingdom. That's why he'd appointed Monet, who had some knowledge. Especially being by his side as the sole secretary after Vivi took on other duties. After Vivi gave birth to Sinbad, she had taken on more of a mother's role than that of an assistant, and Monet had been helping him manage his schedule. All right. I'll help the princess with the kingdom's administration. Call me if you need anything. Monet said, hanging up. Luffy remained thoughtful for a moment, reflecting on who else could help Monet in that role. Maybe Nojiko would be the best choice to support Tori. Nami would think of cleaning out the coffers and profiting off Wano, though she wouldn't trample people to do so. Even Robin would be a good option, but she was likely exploring historical sites and poneglyphs, knowing her. Meanwhile, Jinbai, who was also a great administrator, was taking care of Fishman Island, helping them adapt to their new life on the surface. Luffy would visit the island later to see how they were doing. Those who understood how to run a kingdom were all a bit busy, so Luffy didn't have anyone better than Nojiko to assist Monet and Tori. But now, he had to resolve an important issue: what to do with his prisoners of war. He looked at Weevil and that old woman still on the ground, on the rooftop of Onigashima, lying next to the Black Pearl while being treated by Chopper, who was bandaging the 6-meter-tall man's body. He had been full of other prisoners ever since arriving in the New World, and now he had to deal with them. Building a prison modeled after level 6 of Impel Down seemed like the ideal solution, as he wanted to negotiate with some and keep others tightly secured. Luffy looked toward Onigashima, below the Black Pearl, thinking about the best place to set up a prison. After all, that place would no longer be used as anyone's base. Keeping them there, at the center of all the islands around Wano, seemed like an interesting idea. Alright. Let's deal with this first. Luffy decided. Grabbing the Den Den Mushi, he dialed a number. Before anyone answered, the Den Den Mushi transformed into an older-looking snail, with a mustache and a large beard. Do you need something down here, Monkey D. Luffy? It was Ganfall, the leader of the Skypia territory, in the sky above Wano. The island was still 10,000 meters high, along with Shiki's scientific bases, while other floating islands hovered lower, with the same kind of setting previously applied to Dressrosa. I need to know the current stock of metals that Lola created. Luffy asked. After all, the largest deposits were in Skypia and in the base islands and depots of Shiki that Luffy had been using since defeating him. I can take a look with the folks and let you know. Ganfall replied. After all, there wasn't an exact number available, the stocks had to be constantly checked due to heavy usage in manufacturing everything. Luffy wanted to know if Lola would need to create more. Alright, I want you to summon Shiki's scientist. And also Caesar Clown to come here to Onigashima. I need their input for a project. Luffy said, as Ganfall nodded. After hanging up the Den Den Mushi, he called Lola, while the Den Den Mushi changed appearance. Husband. How can I help? Your wife is here, ready to give you lots of love. She said with a smile. Or maybe. It's time for us to have our child, now that the war is over. Don't you think that's a great idea, husband? Luffy sighed upon hearing that. So. Can you come here to Onigashima? I need your help with some other things. Luffy said in a more serious tone, while she still smiled. Of course. I'll be there in a second. She replied. Luffy then called Frankie, with the Den Den Mushi taking on a look similar to the cyborg. What does the captain need from Super Frankie? He exclaimed enthusiastically. Come to Onigashima. I need your opinion. Luffy requested. Sure thing. He replied, hanging up right after. Luffy then called Leo. I'd like your help here in Onigashima. Ask someone to bring you, I need the Tontita tribe. Luffy requested. The help of the fairies from Dressrosa would be very useful too. Next, Luffy called Bartolomeo. Oh my god, Luffy-senpai. He screamed upon answering. Come to Onigashima. And bring your companion and the user of the storage fruit. I'll need one of the prisoners with him. Luffy requested. He was calling all his scientists, engineers, metal producers, and even the people who worked with rapid construction, to begin the new project. But he still needed someone even more essential to change Onigashima's internal structure and also repair the damage caused by the countless battles. Unsurprisingly, Bartolomeo was the first to arrive, with his companion at his side, looking at Luffy with stars in his eyes. But Luffy ignored him and went straight to Bartolomeo's second-in-command, who also had stars in his eyes. I need you to retrieve a prisoner. Luffy requested, and the man quickly nodded. In the next moment, in a distortion of space, one of the prisoners that Luffy had kept stored among many fell in front of him. He was conscious. What is this? His voice came out thin, but clearly audible, feeling trapped. Where am I? Well, if it isn't the one who tried to stop me from leaving Dressrosa years ago. Luffy crossed his arms. It's a shame I wasn't in the kingdom when you fought Titan Hugo. Must have been quite the battle. As Straw Hat. Pika shouted, unaware that Luffy had since changed his name, his high-pitched voice making everyone around laugh at the scene. Don't laugh. He yelled, furious. Pika, do you know where we are? Luffy stole his attention again, and the former executive of the Don Quixote Pirates tried to look around, confused. We're in Wano. You're not gonna believe what happened, but Kaido, your great sponsor, was defeated. By me. Luffy said, flashing a bandit's smile, while Pika furrowed his brow. I don't see any other choice but for you to cooperate with this. He continued and paused again to let Pika absorb all that information. I want you to work for me from now on. I need your powers here. He said, staring firmly, while Pika, with a tense expression, was still processing the words. He would be fundamental in using his fruit to fix the internal part of Wano just as Luffy wanted, adding metal created by Lola and Seastone into the area right after it was paved. Chapter 504, Let's further expand the fleet. 01. Daddy. Daddy. Sinbad came running toward Luffy and clung tightly to his father's legs. Luffy saw the boy running up to him and looked down, crouching to pick up his son, who was tugging at his clothes like a kitten. The boy smiled at him, amused, stretching out his arms, and Luffy placed him on his shoulder. Why are you running off again? Luffy said seriously, looking at his son. I felt Daddy. He said, correcting his sentence, now able to say more words. Luffy sighed and began to walk as he approached the coral garden ahead. I want Mustang. Sinbad then said again. The boy wanted to ride in the V8 car he had built himself. No. It's not time to play. Let's go back to your mother. Luffy replied as he saw too many Hancocks running up to them behind Sinbad. Sinbad. Luffy, so cute. They shouted, and despite the scolding, their faces softened at the adorable scene of Sinbad on Luffy's shoulder. They approached Luffy. It had been 3 days since Luffy had started the prison project, and it was already practically finished. Pykel had been stunned at first, but Luffy had clearly threatened him, saying that he and his companions could have a chance as long as they put themselves to work, away from the islands. Many people hated Pyke and the other members of the Don Quixote family, and rightly so. Especially in Dressrosa. But in the end, Luffy wanted to use them mainly for the final war. That's why he hadn't killed them. After all, he needed people with the ability to use their devil fruits, and it would be hard to find anyone else with the potential they had for their fruits. Killing them would be a waste, and he'd rather use them in a deal that would benefit both sides. As long as they obeyed orders, he would let them carry out missions directly for the New World's Baroque Works, his intelligence organization that gathered information both from the New World and the first half of the Grand Line. Pykel had no way to refuse Luffy's demands. If he did, he'd go straight back to prison with no chance of escape. He was surrounded on all sides and couldn't use his power. And even if he tried to destroy the mass of Onigashima and reshape it into another giant with all his might, he wouldn't last more than a few seconds. There were numerous powerful pirates around who would sense any disturbance and attack him immediately. Either way, Pyke elaborated on the internal restructuring of Onigashima, organizing the entire rocky mass of the base and shaping it together with the materials that Lola quickly produced to meet the remaining needs for the prison after checking the metal stockpiles in Skypiea. After an intense discussion between Caesar Clown, Shicky's scientist, and Frankie, they reached a solution to better develop the prison. Luffy let them keep working while he thought, maybe he could even count on Dr. Vegapunk's help. Although he knew Caesar would be outraged and jealous at the sight of his rival, the world's greatest scientist probably wouldn't refuse in the end. However, Luffy still couldn't contact him. Maybe after settling the situation at Egghead when the time came, he could talk to Vegapunk and make improvements to Onigashima. With the prison in its final stage of construction, Luffy took advantage of these days to be with his family. He carried Sinbad again to a small garden on Fishman Island, where they were spending their last day visiting the place and showing it to the children while John spent time with them. The two mini Hancocks, who had came to get Sinbad, went along with them. At the location were also Hancock, Robin, Yamato, Vivi, Yuta with a 1-month-old baby, Makita almost giving birth, and Shira Hoshi in her early weeks of pregnancy. Plus, 13 more mini Hancocks taking care of the children and assisting the mothers. Luffy approached them and took Sinbad to Vivi, who was already worried while her son had simply run off. Sinbad. Don't run off like that again. She scolded the child after he had disappeared even from the mini Hancocks when they took their eyes off him. Don't be like that. I think he feels my presence. Luffy said, pleased with this ability of his son. He was with his family, but ended up stepping out for a bit to go see Neptune at the castle, while discussing the current situation of Fishman Island with Jinpai and important people of the island. After all, Luffy was here more to see Fishman Island and assess the situation and how they were adapting. The bubble had finally been burst, as it was no longer necessary. Now, the island remained submerged under the water like a normal island. All the inhabitants now had direct contact with the surface sky and the sun, and could go freely wherever they wished. There would no longer be the danger of being hunted, killed, or kidnapped. Despite that, Luffy knew it wasn't something so simple. People still looked with disgust at fishmen, and only refrained from insulting or attacking them directly because of the order he gave to all the kingdoms, that fishmen were his people and should be treated as such. Otherwise, they would face the consequences of the laws he and the others were beginning to establish universally for all kingdoms. Not that he stripped the kingdoms of their sovereignty, but still, there were universal laws. No one could kidnap, take someone's freedom, kill, seize someone else's property, defame. Basic things that Luffy believed were fundamental and that every living being should naturally have the right to safeguard. Although these rules were already present in most islands, he intended to strengthen them even more. There were also other economic issues. Luffy allowed people to create their own businesses, a free market among kingdoms, with much lower taxes than most kingdoms charged. He wanted the population to be able to get wealthy and not just live paying taxes. And although at first it might seem like he was taking money from the crown, the revenue wouldn't decrease much, or might even increase with higher demand, and as people enriched the local economy, more investments would go to each kingdom. A clear example was that some kingdoms were charging 40 to 60% in taxes, and Luffy declared they should reduce it to a ceiling of 15%, with a suggested ideal of 10% being the most appropriate. Even so, no king really objected to his demands. As part of the reform, Luffy would have to deal with other fronts, like the military issue, which would now require even greater planning since all the kingdoms were more united. He could strengthen them even further. Either way, his attention was now focused on his children. His twin daughters with Hancock were running toward Luffy, calling for him. Daddy! Daddy! All the mini Hancocks had hearts in their eyes, enchanted by the cuteness of the moment. Luffy remained there, with his children, giving attention to the wives who were already mothers and those who were pregnant, while, the next day, he advanced across the islands and kingdoms. Until he found the person he was looking for. He sped forward to the Prince Kingdom and descended from the sky, entering the city quickly, before landing softly on a street full of shops. There, he saw two women shopping. Luffy. Nami murmured, seeing him approach. Beside her was Nojiko. Both were full of bags and walking through the city stores, buying things here and there. The sister's husband approached. Nami. Nojiko. Luffy smiled. Do you need something, Luffy? Nojiko asked curiously. Yes. I'd like you to go to Wano. When you're done here, help Monet and Tori with the kingdom's administration. Bippo will also go there. Luffy said, while Nojiko nodded. All right. I'll do that, Luffy. She replied, while Nami crossed her arms and looked at him seriously. Luffy, you've been too busy lately. This is getting annoying. She said, pouting. Luffy sighed as he looked at his wife. I'll be more available after a talk with some people. I promise I'll take you on a trip. Maybe we can go to Skypiea, or to a calmer island. Luffy said. Nami still seemed to pout, but little by little, her expression softened. All right. I'm going to hold you to that, huh? If not, I'll want money. She murmured. Either way, Luffy also needed to give special attention to his women, since he could feel the gaze coming from afar. Even though he couldn't locate her with his haki, he knew someone was watching him. Most of the time, it was none other than Viola, using her powers to spy on him, while at the same time, Bakura had come looking for him. He would have to give attention to the large group of women too, but he'd leave that for later. Meanwhile, he advanced to Onigashima once again. The members of the Tontita tribe were working quickly at the site, rebuilding the city in a surprising way. They were already nearly finished with the new prison. At last, Luffy spoke directly with Shiki's scientist and with Frankie, who was analyzing the project while reviewing the final details with the other engineers. After that, Luffy placed Black Pearl in front of him and made his way inside to his cabin. Upon entering the room, he saw several small boxes in front of him on the table. There were at least over 20 devil fruits he had obtained during this war and beyond. In front of him were fruits powerful enough to be worth billions, such as the plasma fruit, and others that belonged to the Holy Knights themselves, whom he had defeated during the war. There was also the string fruit, which had belonged to the late Doflamingo. He had the fruits easily from these dead people because he could buy them directly from his system's store, where money was no longer an issue for Luffy. He just needed to think carefully about what to do, how to further expand his fleet and decide who should receive such powers. Either way, he wouldn't hand out all the fruits at once. He had spent the previous night there, in that room, thinking about each one of them, until finally leaving the place. Back inside Onigashima, he could see the fairies of Dressrosa. Or rather the Tontita tribe. Still working, carrying the metal that Lola had created. There were already some prisoners housed there. Luffy went directly to one of them. The man was sitting silently, with a pair of Kairoseki, sea stone, cuffs on his arms. Upon noticing Luffy's approach, he glanced briefly, but showed no emotion. Even so, Luffy could feel through his haki that he was filled with rage, frustration, and fear. Hello, Katakuri. I can understand why you're feeling this way. Luffy said, flashing a friendly smile. Katakuri narrowed his eyes even more. What do you want, Straw Hat? He murmured cautiously. What I want is very simple, Katakuri. I don't want to be your enemy. I'm going to free you and your family. But I want you to join my fleet. Luffy said clearly. He obviously wanted to further increase his strength and knew he'd need all the help he could get when the time came. And he didn't hate the Charlotte family like that. Katakuri had incredible potential, maybe even enough to reach his mother's strength in a few years or a decade if well trained. Luffy wanted him on his side. Besides, Katakuri was someone extremely trustworthy when it came to protecting his family. And Luffy didn't want to see them as enemies. The Charlotte family could still rise again. But now, perhaps under a new flag. Chapter 505, let's further expand the fleet. Oh, too. You want my family to join you? Katakuri said suspiciously. You have another choice? But I don't want you to become directly part of my fleet. After all, you'll be operating from a specific base, which is your base. You can say we'll become allies. Luffy said. Katakuri could be like Ace, acting as an ally, but still with Luffy in command. The 4 emperors' positions would be free for him and the other 4 emperors that he fought and defeated, so he had faith that Ace and Katakuri could take on this position in the future. Why are you doing this and why do you think I'd accept? This is very strange. Katakuri murmured, looking at Luffy. The subordinates of this man had defeated him easily. He clearly wanted to make him and his family into subordinates just like he imagined. Because I have faith in your potential and I'll need it in the final war. Luffy said. Final war? Katakuri narrowed his eyes. A battle that will happen in the future, the whole world against us. I need all the allies who can fight by my side. It won't be just one battle and you won't be able to escape from it. That's why I want us to become allies and for you to follow me in this fight along with your family. Even if you think I'm using you here, I'll repeat that it will involve the entire world and you won't have a choice. Luffy said with his arms crossed. Katakuri was sitting on his saddle with his high knees below his elbows, hiding his teeth, something he didn't show to anyone. My family. How many of my siblings died in this war? He asked with more seriousness than anything else. Don't worry, no one died, all were spared, at least the members of the Charlotte family, now your allies and soldiers. Well, a lot of them died. Luffy said. I see. That's good. He seemed relieved to hear that. If I accept your proposal, will you let my siblings go free? Katakuri added this question. Yes. Your whole family will be released, as long as I get some information from them, like your sister. Pudding, she needs to give me the memory of your red poneglyph. Luffy requested. I see. That sounds reasonable and all you ask is that we become allies and fight in your final battle? And Mama? Katakuri asked again just to make sure Luffy wouldn't leave anything out of his requirements. Exactly, but you'll have to follow some rules. After all, I'm not a big fan of Big Mom killing a bunch of people just for petty reasons like not showing up to her tea parties. As for your mother, she'll be imprisoned and won't leave custody again. You'll take over leadership of the Big Mom Pirates and I advise you to just change the name, you know, continuing that name with you in command would be strange, try something like the Great Charlotte Family or something like that. Luffy said, shrugging. I see. Katakuri seemed thoughtful, he was considering everything, did he even have a choice to begin with? He had an opportunity at this moment. Your lands were attacked by Blackbeard. Luffy suddenly said, seeing him deep in thought as Katakuri looked at the man, his hat nowhere in sight, stunned. There were still members of my family there. He stood up with a tone of urgency. I don't really know. All I know was reported in the newspaper. And even if it wasn't reported, some information reached me. Luffy replied and continued. I know they took the red poneglyph kept in the vaults of your mother's castle, but the place looked pretty destroyed. I haven't had time to check yet. Damn. Katakuri seemed quite nervous as he clenched his fists. There were siblings who couldn't go to war when their mother summoned them for the battle at Onigashima. You want this, Katakuri? To protect your family? But just that is not enough. Luffy spoke to him again. Seriously, you will now have to become far more powerful than you've ever been. You must reach your mother's level and surpass it. Only then will you protect your family. Because we will still be allies, and I'll help when I can. But we won't be your babysitters. You'll have to survive the new world without Big Mom. Are you prepared for that? Are you willing to accept my offer? He asked with a serious look. Katakuri no longer even cared to hide his face after what he heard about his homeland. He looked at Monkey D. Luffy and nodded slowly. I accept your offer, Straw Hat. Free me and my siblings. I will become strong and fight by your side when the time comes, along with my family. Great. Luffy gave a smile. I'll have someone free you and your family. Meanwhile, gather everyone in Alabasta, we'll have a meeting with you all, and you may leave after that. After all, I'll have to explain some things I expect from you. Katakuri nodded. With some doubts still. But also confident. They would let his family go and take care of what happened with the destruction Blackbeard must have caused to reach the poneglyph. Leaving Katakuri's room, Luffy kept walking through the prison as he headed toward the next group, finding a Lunarian training while punching the air with force. You look busy. Luffy said, standing in front of him. King didn't even look at Luffy, continuing to punch the air. Come to mock us, Straw Hat? He muttered, still punching. Luffy just gave a small smile. You know, I heard some stories about you, King. You were captured by the world government and used as an experiment. No wonder they now have weapons made based on your genetics. Luffy began, while King stopped his strikes, narrowing his eyes, wondering where Straw Hat was going with this. Surely it couldn't have been easy for you. And I'm sorry for that. But I also heard that the same boy imprisoned by the government for years was searching for the return of Joy Boy. That one day he would return to free the world. Luffy left the question hanging. What do you know about that? Joy Boy is just a myth. He muttered. You say that because you were unconscious and didn't know what happened in the battle. Did someone tell you it wasn't me who defeated Kaido? Luffy asked. I heard something. I heard it was your sister. He muttered, remembering that the men who put him in prison had commented about it. Luffy nodded. Yes. She awakened her fruit. A mythical zone. And not a Parimsha, like everyone thought. Do you believe there's a zone capable of turning someone into a god? Luffy said calmly, looking directly at him. What do you mean by that? King was confused. I'm saying that my sister's fruit. It's actually called human fruit model, sun god Nika devil fruit. The same power Joy Boy used 800 years ago. And everyone who has the ability of the voice of all things in the world felt the drums of liberation the moment she awakened. Declaring that Joy Boy had returned. He explained. King seemed surprised by that. There was a feeling in him. The feeling of wanting to believe it immediately, but there was still a lot of distrust. And what do you want with all this? King looked seriously again, still unsure where Straw Hat was going with all of this. Not knowing that his name had already changed. That is, Straw Hat was no longer on his head, but rather given to the Joy Boy of this era. It's very simple. I want you to join me, under my flag. Become a member of my fleet and help me in the final battle. Luffy said. So, you do want to recruit me after all? And what do you mean by final battle? He asked. He wasn't too surprised by the first part. After all, it was understandable. But, turning his back on Kaido? Wouldn't that be the same as betraying him? The man who saved him? The final battle will be for the liberation of this world. A war that will involve everyone. Don't you want the chance to fight against the world government? Avenge everything they did to you? And stop anyone else from suffering what you suffered? You know very well. Your race was entirely exterminated by them. You may be the last of your kind. Luffy said. You really think you can handle all those monsters? King muttered. You believed Kaido could. And we are stronger than Kaido. You didn't even have a chance, and we still had a fight you weren't even aware of. The world government sent a considerable force to destroy us. And we still won. He said. King stayed silent for a few seconds, thinking about it. It didn't seem like a lie, after all. What happened to Kaido? He asked. Kaido is now being kept prisoner. And I won't give him freedom. That's because I doubt I can control him, even being stronger. Luffy commented, knowing Kaido was far too proud to try to follow someone's orders. He wasn't as young as he was during the time of rocks. Luffy planned to use Kaido and Big Mom at another time, but, for now, he would keep them imprisoned. I see. King seemed a bit frustrated at that moment. But what else could he do? Maybe he could have a chance at revenge. Finally fight against the Celestials and the world government, like Kaido once planned. If you don't want to be in my fleet, you can just become an ally. But in that case, you won't have an island to protect and you'll have to stay here. You don't need to use my flag. But I will need you in this final battle. Luffy said. No. King shook his head. I'll accept. I'll be part of your fleet. He decided, as Luffy nodded, satisfied with that. Great. I'll have someone release you. But for now, I have other people I want to talk to. I also want to know who from Kaido's group I can bring to my side and who might betray us. Luffy said, leaving the cell as he moved on to the next person he wanted to visit. Luffy kept walking through the prison until he found Page 1 in front of a cell. Sorry big sis. Page 1 murmured. You defeated me, you bastard. Is this how you thank me after all this time? I tried to save you, but you were corrupted by those pirates when they captured you in paradise, Ulti complained, stomping her foot while the sea stone chain clinked. But we were enemies. Big sis. Page 1 tried to defend himself. I don't want to hear it. Ulti snapped. Hey, can you guys be a little quieter? I'm trying to sleep here. Queen muttered from another cell. Luffy raised an eyebrow at that and hoped King would pass along the names of those he could trust. They'd be great allies and his fleet would become even stronger. But now he had something else to deal with. After all, he was about to begin Operation Sword. First, he would deal with the ex-Admiral Zephyr. It was time to create the new Marine Force and he would lend a hand with that, placing his sister in command of the new Marine Force. With Zephyr and Fujitora with her, Garp, Kobe, and the others would join too, making it an even more powerful force. Chapter 506, A New Navy? Hello, Zephyr. Luffy stared at the leader of the current Neo Marines. Luffy had placed him and all the other members in custody in this prison as well, and the others were further down the corridor. Upon hearing his name, Zephyr looked up at Luffy, while both of his arms were raised, chained to the wall. Straw Hat. Are you here to mock my failed plan? He murmured, and his spark was gone. Part of his glasses was broken, revealing the eye of the former Marine Admiral, disheartened. Which shouldn't surprise Luffy, considering the loss Zephyr had suffered and all his plans destroyed, even the possibility of having killed Luffy, Kaido, and Big Mom during the war by summoning explosive stones to create a catastrophe at the 3 key points of the New World. Of course, Luffy had gone to him with Lucy, but let his sister defeat him. You were going to create a worldwide crisis, man. Do you have any idea how much worse you'd be than any pirate you claim to fight? You would have killed more people than anyone else in this world. Were you aware of that when you decided to destroy the New World? Luffy asked in a serious tone. Some sacrifices would have to be made to make it a better place. Zephyr commented. Luffy wanted to mock him. You'd be the worst of them all, worse than what you claim to fight. You'd be condemned like a curse on the lips of every single person in this world who survived the chaos you were going to cause. You were going to destroy the New World, fine. And with it, take down all of the world's greatest pirates. But what guarantees that pirates like them wouldn't rise again at sea? After all, every pirate started from nothing, and not all of them came from the New World. Luffy questioned. Zephyr remained silent for a while, and in the end, Luffy continued. Besides, your catastrophe wouldn't only affect the New World, but the whole planet. The skies would grow dark and acidic, and the seas would shift in balance. Do you have any idea? Millions of people would die. Have you ever seen any pirate go that far? He asked again. Luffy had also once threatened to kill millions, but that was just a bluff, something done to match the threats of the world government. Of course, if the government had really hurt his children, he didn't know what he might have done. So, it was good that they'd reached an agreement. Either way, Zephyr seemed thoughtful. Luffy looked at him. The idiot hadn't even thought of that. His hatred had nearly destroyed the world. Either way, Luffy broke the silence once again. I have all the members of the Neo Marines. Along with all the research, resources, and the base itself. Those explosive stones are quite interesting. Did anyone die? Zephyr asked. Luffy shook his head. No. None of them were killed, if that's what you want to know. And what do you want with me? Zephyr didn't understand where Luffy was going. Well, to be honest. After what you tried to do, I wanted to kill you. Luffy said, ready to draw his pistol and shoot that man in the head, acting out of anger. It didn't matter if he was in chains, Luffy would treat him the same way he would treat the Tenri Obito after what he had tried to do to the world. Even though he had handled the situation relatively calmly, by taking his sister to defeat him, it didn't change the fact that this guy had nearly screwed the entire planet. But he might still be useful. But you didn't. Why? Zephyr questioned. It's for a pretty important reason. Luffy paused. I intend to build a navy. He said, making Zephyr immediately look up and growl at Luffy. You've got to be kidding. A pirate like you wants to create a navy? Stop with the nonsense. He immediately said with a tone of near hatred. That felt like a slap in the face to Zephyr. You don't understand. I imagine you already know we defeated Kaido. After all, we wouldn't be in Onigashima right now. I'm sure some people have mentioned it. Luffy began, with a calmer tone. Anyway, I'm creating the largest territory cluster in the world right now around Wano, to protect all the countries and kingdoms from the world government and our enemies. Still, I'm not much of a fan of chaos, or of what some pirates might do. I won't lie, I've stolen and killed those I thought deserved it. But I've never committed worse crimes, and I wouldn't want that happening under my waters or anywhere else. He paused, then continued, and you know. The Navy is submissive to the world government. You know very well how the government can act. That's why. I want to create an independent force. It's already forming naturally, since many Marines will be leaving the Navy in the coming weeks, after what happened in Mary Joyce during the reverie. And I want to support it. It might sound hypocritical. But I also want people, even those not living in my territory, to be able to live peaceful lives. And what is this force? Zephyr murmured. Well, all signs point to my grandfather and great talents like Kobe being part of it, as well as many other Marines who place justice above the power of the world government. Here, I have Fujitora. And Lucy. Luffy said firmly. I'd like to put Lucy as the one to lead this force. You know she might be a pirate right now, but she still has her purity and sense of justice. There's no one better to lead this new navy. I refuse to be part of this. Zephyr murmured. So that's how your life is going to end? Imprisoned by a pirate? Alongside your own members? Don't you truly want to fight pirates? The ones who are truly evil? To fight as a force, without the pressure of the world government? Luffy asked. Zephyr remained silent. Besides, I captured Weevil. Did you know that? That sentence immediately caught Zephyr's attention. You captured him? He murmured. Yes. The world government ended the 7 Warlords of the Seas program after what they saw in Dressrosa, during the Reverie meeting. It was announced there, and then to the world. But the government created a force to replace them. Even though many former Corsairs went out trying to seize kingdoms. Even so, that force became powerful in battle, advancing without questioning orders, killing anyone who might be a threat to the government. You have a deep hatred for him, more than anyone, don't you? Luffy asked, firmly. You want to give him to me? Zephyr immediately understood that Luffy was offering something. Him. I can't give. After all, he might be useful in the final battle. Give him to me. Zephyr suddenly shouted, pulling at his chains, trying to break free by force. Luffy had to silently admit, the hatred he felt for Weevil was greater than he'd thought. I'm not going to hand over a chained man to you, Zephyr. But I can release him in front of you. If you manage to defeat him and kill him, that's your problem. Luffy said, making Zephyr growl. Surely, he wasn't stronger than Weevil. However, Luffy continued, Weevil is just a kind of primate with strength. He doesn't know how to think properly. I can hand over the old woman here. You're certain she ordered the killing of your entire crew? Does that satisfy you? Luffy asked. No. I want him too. Zephyr replied firmly. How about this? I give your entire team a chance. That includes your 2 main apprentices, and I'll also release you. Then you work in this new navy, without wanting to destroy the new world. You'll protect this sea and all the others. As long as you don't attack any member of my fleet. Luffy said, looking directly at Zephyr. At the same time, you'll have my protection. And I won't allow the world government to try to fight you. After all, the official navy will see you as enemies. And you're going to give me both of them? Zephyr asked. Yes. I'll give you both so you can try to get your revenge. But I won't leave them chained. You'll have to fight fair. After all, I was the one who captured them, not you. Luffy said, while the commander thought for a moment. All right. I accept your proposal. Zephyr replied, in the end. Lucia nodded. Great then. Luffy picked up a Denden Mushi and gave orders. As Domino approached with a whip in hand, she was overseeing the prison. Captain. She said. Do me a favor. Bring that old woman. And give me the key to this cell. Luffy requested. She nodded, pulled one of the keys from her pocket, and handed it to Luffy. He took the key, opened the cell, and released Zephyr, who watched his chains fall as he massaged his wrists. A moment later, Domino came dragging the old woman by the whip, pulling her to the cell. Hey! What do you think you're doing? Do you know who I am? I'm Whitebeard's woman. Our son is going to kill you all. She shouted, before being thrown into the cell. When she looked up, she found herself face to face with Monkey D. Luffy. She remembered the pressure of his conqueror's haki when he brought her down. Even though she had once been on a ship like the Rocks, she knew what that meant. Being there as a prisoner also meant her son had lost. In the end, both had fallen into the hands of that monster. She looked to the side, seeing a man with broken glasses. His eyes glowed with pure hatred. She controlled Weevil. If you really want to avenge your crew, let it be through her. Luffy said, turning to Zephyr. Anyway, I'll be heading out. You can find me on the roof of the place. Luffy closed the cell bars and walked away, with Domino at his side. Luffy went to get Weevil. He was confused when Luffy easily carried him and threw him in the middle of the prison roof, removing his shackles. Hey! What is this? Where's Mom? Weevil murmured. We'll talk about your mother later. For now, let's wait. Luffy requested, while Weevil looked around, confused. Shortly after, Zephyr approached, fists covered in blood. He had certainly killed the woman mercilessly. Luffy felt no pity for her. After all, that woman had been killing people through Weevil all the time. Well, Weevil, you're going to have to fight this guy. But don't kill him. Luffy said, while Weevil was still confused, watching the man approach in anger. Don't kill me? I'm going to finish him. Zephyr responded, immediately drawing the attention of many pirates nearby, watching the powerful Monkey D. Luffy set up the fight. Meanwhile, Luffy kept his distance to give orders and intervene if needed, preventing the fight from getting out of control, or at least, from becoming deadly. He stepped up to Weevil and pulled something from his pocket, remembering the weapon he had picked up earlier. He tossed it to Weevil as it returned to normal size, then crossed his arms again and watched carefully, making sure neither of them died. After all, both were still important to his plans. Chapter 507, Claiming Another Princess. The fight lasted 10 minutes, but in the end, Zephyr ended up falling. He just hoped that Luffy would keep his word. At the same time, Weevil was panting, a bit bruised, but nothing serious. He simply advanced to eliminate Zephyr, spinning with his weapon, until Luffy appeared in front of him almost as if he had teleported and stopped the blade with his arm in front of the fallen Zephyr. His forearm had turned into pure hockey, blocking the attack and releasing a wave of force in all directions. "What did I say about not trying to kill him?" Luffy said, enduring the pressure of the enemy's weapon. "He said he killed Mom." Weevil shouted, enraged. This guy had to open his mouth in the middle of the fight for that. Luffy murmured, disappointed with Zephyr, who had said that just to provoke the enemy and could now die because of it. Weevil didn't seem willing to stop. He tried to get past Luffy, raising his weapon again, imbuing it with hockey, ready to devastate everything in front of him. Quickly, he spun, dancing with the blade toward Luffy. But in the next moment, Luffy simply clenched his fist and threw a punch, multiplying his strength 100-fold. The only thing that could be heard was a groan. Before Weevil simply vanished, dropping his weapon, which hit the ground with a dull thud. Everyone present was surprised to see that there was no longer any sign of the giant, as the punch was so strong that no one there could follow him flying away. Only, in the next instant, an explosion shook the space behind them. Everyone looked toward the massive tower in the center of Wano, which was the natural tower. What? He was launched all the way there? That's... how many kilometers? Exclaimed all members of Luffy's fleet, stunned. "I'll go there and deal with it," Luffy said, as his wings disappeared. "Call Chopper. Ask him to take care of this man's wounds," Luffy added, referring to Zephyr, and in the next moment, he vanished at such high speed that not even the most experienced could react to his movement. In the flower capital, an explosion appeared more than 1,000 meters away. Stones began to fall from the sky, frightening everyone in the city who were watching the sudden blast. This looks bad. Who threw that? There's someone in there," Nojiko murmured, next to Monet and Bippo, who were helping with the reconstruction of the country with the princess. The stones plummeted with force and advanced toward the city, and Princess Hori was startled upon seeing them. But in the next instant, explosions of flames appeared in the sky, disintegrating each rock one by one. Not even dust remained. The flames of chaos had disintegrated all the matter in the air. Luffy emerged from the hole where he had thrown Weevil. He was carrying the giant completely knocked out, with his face covered in blood. He descended at high speed and landed on the castle that had been recently rebuilt. "Luffy," Nojiko commented as Monet approached with a worried look. "Sorry about that. I just wanted to take him down with one punch. But I overdid it and ended up hitting that stone pillar in Wano," Luffy said with a smile, after simply creating a hole there, and simply dropping Weevil to the ground. The enemy's body slid for several meters before stopping, completely defeated. "Hey, you guys. Can you tie this around him?" Luffy asked directly to the red scabbards who were there to protect Hori. With no choice, they all moved forward grabbing the chains Luffy was throwing near Weevil's body. "Well, how are things going?" Luffy asked his crew members. "We're taking care of the resources. Resources and other food are being distributed effectively, prioritizing the most affected areas. But hunger is no longer a problem in the country," Monet said, opening her notebook to pass the data to Luffy. "Good news," Luffy replied, satisfied with the information, and returned to Nojiko and Bippo. "I'm sure Nojiko and Bippo are working to manage ideas that could lift the country economically as well," Luffy commented, approaching the others. "Yes, Captain. Due to the areas being quite diverse in climate, it's possible to grow many types of crops. Besides that, Wano is richly supplied with precious stones and ore. Kdu didn't fully exploit them, so the reserves are quite full," Bippo explained. "That's very good to hear," Luffy said, turning to the princess. "And how are you managing Wano?" Luffy asked. "I'm trying," Hori murmured, knowing that administration wasn't exactly her area, since she had never been prepared for it. What she knew how to do was dance and sing, display her beauty. But even so, she was trying hard. And Luffy recognized that. "Very well. I'm sure you're doing a good job," he said, thinking about what he would do, but feeling too lazy to return, so he decided to stay and handle his matters through the communicators. "I'll stay here for a while, since I finished my conversations with the main leaders among the prisoners we have," Luffy said, and remained in the flower capital for a while, handling matters of territorial administration with the help of the Den Den Mushi. "Luffy, come to Curry. We're Toden's grave. Ace's crew is paying tribute to him," Lucy exclaimed through the Den Den Mushi, with emotion in her voice. "Alright, I'll meet you later," Luffy replied, hanging up the Den Den Mushi and resolving a few more prison-related issues. The Charlotte family members were already all freed. At the same time, King was talking with the Beast Pirates members, to check who would truly be loyal to the fleet, as Luffy had requested. Luffy then hung up the last Den Den Mushi, sighed, and finally looked at the door. "Come on. Are you going to stay out there the whole time? Just come in already," he said, hearing a small muffled gasp and the sound of the lock turning. Shortly after, Hori slowly entered the room. "Can I talk to you for a bit?" she asked, her neck stretched around the doorframe. "Sure, go ahead," Luffy replied. She entered with a harp in her hands. Even though he already knew through hockey, Luffy still raised an eyebrow, curious. She seemed shy. "Wanted to thank you for saving my land. I'm not good with administration. Or even with words. But I wanted to thank you somehow. May I play for you a little?" Luffy was silent for 2 seconds and gave the girl a smile. "Sure," Luffy replied, letting her do it her way. She sat on the tatami in front of Luffy, who was by a small table with tea and several Den Den Mushi scattered around. She began to play. The melody was soft, and Luffy had to admit to himself that it was quite pleasant. Hori began to sing a traditional Wano song, which Luffy didn't know, but soon came to appreciate, as he sipped his tea. Gradually, he observed the light in her eyes intensify. The notes of the music gained emotion, and tears began to stream down Hori's face. "Thank you," she said, finishing the song, with the tears still sliding down her face. Luffy touched her face, wiping the wet eyes. Both shared a gentle smile. "You don't need to thank me anymore. And I don't intend to take this country from your brother. It belongs to your family," he said, since that woman usually seemed cautious about the idea of others taking Wano, as Orochi and Kaido had done. "Yes. I believe you, it's just that everything kept repeating and I refused to believe you at first. I'm sorry," she said, taking his hands as the two stared at each other in silence for a moment. They stayed there for a while, and Luffy didn't even know how he ended up with that princess on his lips as they began kissing and removing their clothes in that room without anyone disturbing them. Some time later, Luffy was putting his jacket back on, looking at the woman lying on the tatami, naked, covered only by a firm cloth. He still wondered how they had gotten to that point. But he had ended up taking her virginity right there. He scratched his head. Well, I guess that happens. He had been direct with her before anything happened, said he had many lovers, really many, and knew that some women might not accept that. But she shook her head. "I know that well. But it's okay. You saved my land. And I want to be your woman, if that's what you wish," she had said. And that's how it happened, right there in that room. "Are you leaving already?" Her voice came up as Luffy was getting ready. "Yeah. I need to handle a few more things. I'll be back as soon as I can," Luffy replied. "All right. But are you sure you're going to leave behind such an amazing woman like me?" she said, blinking her eyes with charm. Luffy gave a small smile, already knowing that her personality was exactly like that. And as he was leaving, he thought better of it, maybe she was interested in going to the place too. "I'm going to your father's grave. Do you want to come along?" Luffy finally asked, and he wasn't wrong, she wanted to go. "You're going there?" "Of course. Please, take me with you," she said, excited. "Then get dressed. We'll bathe on the way," Luffy said, while she grabbed her dress. But it was too wrinkled, and she seemed unwilling to wear it like that. Seeing this, Luffy simply accessed the system, picked a dress from the list and bought it, tossing it to her. The dress was huge, with a skirt that flared out like a mane from the waist down. "Sorry. I don't really know how to tell dresses apart," he commented. She didn't mind. And then, together, they jumped out the window and headed toward the Curry region. On the way, they stopped at a secluded place to take a quick bath, wash off the sweat, and have sex once more. After that, they went to the old castle, where Hori and her brother had lived with their father and mother. There were also the graves of the Red Scabbards, who would soon return to the place. Luffy met Marco, Ace, Lucy, and the others, who were organizing a banquet in honor of Odin. They were surprised to see Hori with Luffy. They talked about her father, about her mother, and about old stories from the time they sailed with Odin, and she seemed excited to hear about them. Luffy stayed there for a while, drinking, eating, and talking with his brothers and the old Whitebeard crew. Meanwhile, Hori was serving him and staying by his side, seeming like a truly devoted wife. After that, Luffy took Hori back to the flower capital and then left for Alabasta, shortly before midnight, to meet all the Charlotte family members, who were there with Kitakuri, honoring his word. Present were all from the main family and even members of the fleet, including Kaponbaj, one of the most unexpected, and the one who had wanted to kill Big Mom in secret, even from Luffy, upon reuniting with his fellow worst generation comrade. Chapter 508, Taking Care of a Few Things. The massive ship crashed into the water on one of the edges of Alabasta. A large pink ship appeared before them, one of the largest in the world. After Luffy took it out of his pocket and enlarged it, it showed signs of being a bit damaged, but it was still the official ship of Big Mom, which had been harmed during the arrival of the Straw Hat Fleet. It had suffered some impacts as it advanced through the skies, with holes and some broken masts, but still, it was good enough to sail. But still, it was ready to continue sailing. Luffy had finished talking to the members of the Charlotte family, explaining the situation and how this alliance would work from that moment onward. "Here's the ship. You'll be able to go home," Luffy said, as he started throwing more and more ships he had taken from Onigashima after the war, beginning to position them around the coast for the other Charlotte family allies as he tossed them into the sea. "We want Blackbeard to pay for what he did," Katakuri said seriously to Luffy while ignoring the ship, stating his last wish, while Luffy nodded at his request, understanding his anger. "I know. That moment will come. But you're not ready for that war yet. So, go take care of things in your territory and then come back here. We'll train you," Luffy said, hoping they could establish a minimum level of security so they could return without worrying about their territory being attacked again, while Katakuri nodded, a bit frustrated. "Are you already leaving? What a shame," Lola shouted, hugging Charlotte Smoothie, who was a little stunned by her sister acting like that. The same sister who had defeated her in the Battle of Onigashima, showing surprising power, and whose appearance reminded her a lot of Big Mom in her youth. "Lola, stop it," Smoothie said, as Lola pulled away from her and moved toward the other twin sister, Chiffon, who was still chubby, which was why there was a difference between the two. Chiffon stood by her husband, Budge, maintaining a cautious look, especially toward Luffy, who was still talking to Katakuri. "Good luck, sister. I'll stay here with my husband," Lola said, smiling, while Luffy kept talking to all the members before finally heading back to the ship. "Hey, you bastard. You better take care of my sister." The one who said this to Luffy was none other than Sanji, standing next to Pudding, who had also been involved in the fight. Luffy looked at him, raising an eyebrow. "And you better behave too, Blondie. Hey, behave yourself with your wife there. After all, Ray just said you were kind of a pervert for women." "What? That's a lie," Sanji immediately protested. "It doesn't matter, just listen. If I catch you looking at any of my wives, I'll give you such a beating that you'll be unrecognizable," Luffy responded with a serious threat. "That damn bastard. How can he have so many women and be so calm about it, without any problem?" Sanji murmured, clearly envious, as someone came up beside him and began pulling his ear, dragging him away. "What are you saying, you bastard? Get back inside. Let's go," Pudding said, pulling her husband away angrily. Luffy ignored that, letting out a sigh. The girl didn't have access to the poneglyph, meaning she couldn't extract the memory. Luffy would have to get it directly from Blackbeard now. But that wouldn't be a problem. With the strength gathering there, Blackbeard had gained more enemies than benefits by taking that poneglyph. Luffy had also talked a bit with Sanji earlier, as the blonde asked about his family and what would happen to them, since Germa 66 wasn't among the Charlotte family allies returning to the sea. Luffy would still keep them with him, as they would be important for his plans, and he believed that Vinsmoke Judge would no longer be able to oppose anything Luffy commanded after the war. And so, the Charlotte family finally began to leave Alabasta, along with their allies, heading toward Big Mom's former territory, which now belonged to her children, and Luffy would keep Big Mom imprisoned for another occasion. Luffy then left the place and moved toward the capital of Alabasta, meeting King Cobra, who immediately complained, asking, "Where is my grandson?" "He's on Fishman Island, with his mother," Luffy replied. This immediately brought a look of dissatisfaction to the king's face. However, Luffy didn't care and quickly began dealing with some requests and plans with the Alabasta court, ignoring the king who still wanted to see Sinbad. Luffy demanded an area to cultivate some things in the desert. Luffy finished and then moved on to Dressrosa a moment later, finding a massive giant ship. It was Hadruden, along with the other giants, ready to depart. "So you're leaving now?" Luffy commented as he approached them. "Yes, Lord Luffy. We're going back to Elbaf, as you requested. We'll be leaving tonight," Hadruden replied. Luffy had asked them to go ahead to gather the other giant members, since not all had gone to Dressrosa or participated in the war. There were still a few more to gather, and Luffy intended to go there after Egghead, knowing there would be a massive battle to help Dr. Vegapunk. Hadruden and his crew said their goodbyes, as even Brogy and Dory approached with heavy steps. "We're going home, Captain," Brogy said with a smile. "Yes. We'll hitch a ride and throw a big welcome banquet when the captain gets there," Dory said, while Luffy watched them with a slight smile. "Very well. In a few months, we'll be there. Luffy said. Then the giants passed him, also boarding the ship along with the others and beginning to set sail. In the end, the destination would be Elbaf. But first, Luffy needed to resolve all the problems in the places where his presence was still needed. Explosions began happening in the sky at that moment, and Luffy looked up with a raised eyebrow. Reiju and Lami hadn't stopped fighting for the past few days. All because of a silly argument that resulted in a lower bounty, and now they wanted to prove who is stronger. Luffy then spread his wings and quickly shot up into the sky, heading in that direction, as a bluish field appeared, with flames spreading everywhere. Reiju was trying to defeat her opponent, who even in that field used her own flames to her advantage, dodging attacks. Even their haki was on the same level, with the Operation Fruit not being very effective against Reiju. It was at that moment that both were about to clash with each other. Lami held her sword while Reiju charged in with her leg. Both used their most powerful form of armament and Conqueror's haki, generating an explosion so strong it even affected the surrounding space. Then, someone appeared between them. One hand held Lami's arm. The other held Reiju's leg. He simply appeared out of nowhere. It was Luffy. He pushed both of them away from each other, spinning his body and starting to hurl them, one after the other, downward at high speed. The ground of an island full of giant animals, terrified from days of the two fighting above them, exploded with the impact of the bodies hitting in sequence. What was that? Reiju murmured, as the area burst into flames to the sound of a scream that resembled a phoenix. On the other side, Lami climbed out of the crater her body had created, with a serious look. Both had their clothes torn from the intense battle. Then, another person appeared, hitting the ground in front of them. Even before seeing, both already knew who it was. Luffy just raised an eyebrow. So it was you, then. Lami murmured as she saw Luffy approaching. Enough of this nonsense. He said, ready to teach them a lesson, just like he had done in Skypiea the first time, and moved forward before they started fighting again. Some time later, they were at a waterfall on that island with no giant animal approaching them, Luffy hugging the two naked women after having given his lesson. He had brought them there, where there had been intense sex. Damn you. I was just trying to prove to her that I was stronger. Lami said angrily. You shouldn't have interfered when I was about to beat her. Reiju murmured, still somewhat tired. It was already morning by then, and the sun lit up the place. Luffy had given them his lesson until they were exhausted throughout the night, even after days of fighting. They weren't thinking straight. And he even used his more fruit model, Amplify Human Devil Fruit to provide some very intense experiences. Obviously, both ended up being defeated by that. Why are you fighting like this? You know you're pregnant, right? Luffy said in a serious tone, looking at Lami. Lami hadn't said anything, but Luffy had figured it out. So you know. Lami murmured, a little embarrassed. Obviously. I've been feeling the breath of life coming from you for over a week now. You're at least 2 weeks pregnant. Luffy said. He had immediately felt life blooming in her womb, which indicated it was the result of an encounter they had before the war. He might not be able to sense a seed sprouting in Shirahoshi's body as quickly as from one day to the next, like the seer had told Luffy when they removed the Fishman's Island from the sea. But he could definitely feel life beginning to form after 2 weeks. What? She's pregnant? Reiju immediately widened her eyes, seeming to receive a sudden shot of adrenaline upon hearing that. Yes, I'm pregnant, you idiot. Reiju heard that from Lami and immediately clenched her teeth. Bitch. You're going to be a mother. Reiju murmured. Yes. Jealous? I can get pregnant, obviously. After all, I'm a fertile woman and would be a great mother. Lami didn't hold back from provoking. She said that while Reiju saw it as a challenge, which even made Luffy raise an eyebrow. Damn you. Come on, Luffy. Give me a child too. Reiju said, already grabbing Luffy's member under the water. Wait, Reiju. That's not how things work. Luffy said, a little surprised by the cook's aggressiveness. After all, there was a right time, and his women used medicine to prevent pregnancy, since activity between them was quite frequent, and there was concern about the dangers of the sea, although some chose to actually get pregnant. And Lami was one of them. After all, she had really stopped taking the medicine on purpose. She was a very responsible woman to get pregnant by accident, being the ship's doctor. Why did you want this? Luffy couldn't help but ask her, ignoring Reiju, who simply raised her body once again, ready to have sex with Luffy. Let's just say, I want to have at least 2 kids. Now that things have calmed down, I don't want to be an old mother. Reiju said, and Luffy couldn't disagree. The sooner a mother has a child, the better, even in a world where bodies are as powerful as in One Piece. Extending the age isn't great for someone who wants to be a mother, and Lami wasn't as young as the other girls, being around Yamato's age. Chapter 509, One Piece Daily. Let's get started. Luffy said, looking at the enormous stack of papers and a large warehouse on one of the floating islands filled with factories and depots. Several machines were running simultaneously in the building next door, endlessly printing more and more papers without stopping. This was a plan Luffy had devised since he hid in Skypiea for a year, training and growing stronger. One of the things he needed for his grand plan was to shake the world's confidence in the world government. After all, his goal was to destroy them once and for all. That's why he had created a way to spread information that usually wouldn't appear in the Morgan News newspapers. It could be said that Luffy was creating a new newspaper for the world. Of course, Morgan's wasn't the only newspaper out there, but certainly none of the others came close to the global reach that bird had. But just like Morgan's paper, the other newspapers couldn't go against the world government either. And that's where Luffy's plan would come in. Even though his newspaper didn't have a worldwide reach, Luffy would start with the Grand Line. Now, with several agents spread across all areas of the New World, except for the deeper regions, where Luffy had yet to explore, this would serve to begin spreading an underground newspaper. And all those thousands of pages in front of him would be the first step toward that. Soon, this will be even more effective at weakening the world government's power around the world than the decades my father tried with the Revolutionary Army. Luffy commented to himself. The goal was to completely turn public opinion against the world government folks. In any case, Luffy looked at the newspaper in his hands from the other news company. This one had information from the day before, with Morgan's quickly picking it up, like the Charlotte family's departure from Luffy's territory free after the war, with images of their ships sailing back into the sea, and a suggestion of a possible alliance between them and Rock D. Luffy. Just like Luffy's alliance with the remnants of the Whitebeard pirates after bringing the island they were on into the territory of the Dawn pirates. Another suggestion was Luffy recruiting all members of the Beast's pirates, saying his strength was growing even more with the pirate groups he had defeated. Certainly, this worried the world government and the Navy even more, as his fleet kept growing stronger, with defeated enemies joining him. Suddenly, he saw Ecchi's scientist approaching along with Caesar Clown. They had created the printing machines together, and the ones working directly on them were the Germa 66 clones, who kept the production of the first pages going. Here's the first issue of the newspaper, the scientist said, handing Luffy the newspaper he himself had named. On the cover, there was the symbol of the One Piece world with the headline of the Four Blues. The name of the newspaper, One Piece Daily. Great. Let's start distributing them, Luffy said, while a specific team was already organizing for it. They would have to move the hundreds of thousands of copies elsewhere to free up the warehouse, while Luffy had a unique logistics scheme for this, even better than Morgan's logistics. Quickly, the enormous stacks of newspapers began to disappear from the warehouse. The next day, people began receiving strange newspapers at their doorsteps, whether in villages or cities. Anyone who tried to investigate said they were delivered during the night, without knowing exactly how they got there. What's this? A man muttered, approaching the newspaper as he stepped out of his house to go to work. One Piece Daily? He murmured, confused. And as soon as he started reading the first headlines, his eyes widened. Is the world government truly trustworthy? The question was featured prominently. As you know, the world government deceived the entire world by claiming it would honor its agreement with Straw Hat. Regardless of who he is or what crimes he's committed, the world government put its own integrity to the test by declaring it would not interfere in the War of the Four Emperors, so long as Luffy handed over the former fleet admiral of the Marines. And even while holding Admiral Fujitora hostage, the world government still broke its agreement and launched an attack, both in Onigashima and in Dressrosa, with the clear intention of destroying Straw Hat, going so far as to strike his weakest point, one of Monkey D. Luffy's sons, with a fleet full of government weaponry. The man was stunned as he read. The article continued, reporting that the government was not to be trusted and could easily break its own promises. How could someone have published this? He muttered again, afraid of what he was reading. After all, this could cause serious problems. Images started appearing, destroyed androids alongside pacifistas and government fleets, while other photos showed the faces of innocent people being attacked by the machines. The suggestion was clear. The government wanted to maintain total control over the population, and would use those machines to do it. Another alarming headline was about the periodic tribute to the celestial dragons, a delicate subject that few dared to touch. The tribute of tributes, why does it still exist? The report questioned the reason behind the absurd annual charges, presenting shocking data on the government's program budgets. It also revealed secrets, such as obscure genetic experiments, with provocative questions like, did you know you're funding weapons that will be used against you? Where is most of the money that countries and kingdoms are paying going? A large portion of the funds is disappearing. Being used to finance the luxury of the celestial dragons, and even to pay for slaves, who could very well be you too. At that moment, a woman came out of the house, seeing her husband standing at the entrance, holding the newspaper while she was preparing breakfast for the children. "What are you still doing there? You're going to be late for work," she scolded. "Look at this, dear," the man muttered in fear, handing the newspaper to his wife. She took the paper and, as she began to read, had the same reaction as he did. She was equally stunned, shocked by the content. Quickly, it wasn't just that household. All over the city, people were coming out of their homes and seeing the newspaper at their doorsteps. Soon, everyone already knew exactly what was in those papers, something that was spreading across the entire kingdom of Kelly, in the south of the New World. Even the king found out, when he discovered a copy of the newspaper on his own throne. "Who dares do this?" he exclaimed, his face pale. The king became extremely agitated. He feared the world government, but now the issue ran deeper. The entire population was reading that paper. And soon, people began openly discussing the newspaper's contents, loudly, in the streets, in the squares, in the markets, publicly. This began to happen on several islands at the same time. As the hours passed, the New World started to descend into chaos because of it, while the world government quickly received the news, putting all of Mary Jo's into a state of urgent alert. "Here's the paper. They're being spread throughout the New World," someone shouted as they entered the room. The Grossi received the information through the Cipher Pol Zero agent agency, which had quickly gathered the data and sent it by fax. "How do they have this data?" The table was immediately slammed by one of them. There was information about the cost of the Navy and other programs. No one outside the high ranks should have access to that data. "It's him. That damn monkey D. Luffy is behind this," another accused, obviously furious. "He's trying to turn public opinion against us. That bastard practically painted us as if we treat the world like livestock." Another of the elders grabbed the Den Mushi in anger. "I want all of those copies, no matter how many there are or where they are, confiscated immediately. Arrest anyone who is discussing this in public," he gave the order firmly. "You know we can't arrest everyone in the world, right?" murmured another, worried. "Damn it. What a headache. Here we go again dealing with this," a third said, clearly frustrated. They knew the government itself had caused this. They had deceived the entire world and were now paying the price, failing to achieve their goals, which was even more frustrating. "Now we have another problem rising. We're forced to deal with this one first," said one of them. "Yes. Either way, we still haven't found our target, but everything indicates he's heading to Lulusa. Then it's decided. It's time to finally test the mother flame. Let's kill two birds with one stone. Yes. Let's wait for him to reach the kingdom and execute the plan, while our agents and some of the holy knights pursue him. We can't let this continue. We need to know exactly how Monkey D. Luffy managed to spread this throughout the entire New World. That should be impossible," they murmured, trying to figure out how Luffy had managed to do all of this in just one night. Somewhere else, back in the islands within the territory of the Dawn Pirates, Morgans was on the phone, visibly irritated, staring at the Den Mushi with boredom. "What is this? Are you trying to create competition against me?" he shouted, furious. "Don't be so annoying, Morgans. You're not the only newspaper in the world," Luffy replied, his voice disinterested. "But I'm the only global-level newspaper. How did you manage to do this?" Morgans demanded to know. He knew newspapers were usually confined to their own kingdoms, but now he was facing real competition. "I'm not selling newspapers, if that's what you want to know, you fool. I'm distributing them for free." "Well, that's true," Morgans grumbled, unsure how to argue with that. "Wait. What do you want with all this? Why are you creating a newspaper? And why are you giving it away for free? I want to know," Morgans asked, his voice tense and suspicious. "Isn't it obvious?" Luffy answered. "While you have to be careful not to become a target of the world government, I created a way to question the regime, without censorship, to question the world government's actions, their plans, and how they exploit people." He paused before concluding, "I'd say I'm the real newspaper. Don't you think?" Morgans went silent for a few seconds, clearly offended by the provocation. "How dare you say that?" he muttered, but before he could continue, he heard only the click of the Den Mushi hanging up. Luffy had already ended the conversation. He had more urgent matters to deal with. His attention now turned to another island in the New World. Everything pointed to the events in Lulusa unfolding soon. And now, he was preparing to leave, ready to handle it personally. Chapter 510, The Destruction of Lulusa begins. The kingdom of Lulusa was in complete chaos. Ecchi, the king of Lulusa, was arriving at the country's port along with his daughter after returning from Mary Jo's and the reverie, but found the entire nation in great revolt against his regime, as he was extremely cruel, charging high taxes to pay the tributes to the Tenri Obidos and showing no concern for the kingdom or its citizens. planting a dictatorship where people were executed and humiliated for any comment about him or for disobeying absurd laws. Inspired by the revolts and the revolutionary army in various countries around the world, the citizens turned against their own king, who was surprised as the very residents captured him, attacking the guards, who were eliminated. Seiki began to be pulled along with his daughter, "Come on, from the ship." "What are you doing, you bastards? Release me now!" the king shouted, while he was in a very bad situation, now handcuffed, trying to break free, as the kingdom's men dragged him away. "Let go of my father, you inferior beings, damn peasants, you'll pay for all this." His daughter also shouted angrily, trying to hit any of the men who were taking her along with her father. "Enough of your regime, King Seiki. Lulusa can't take it anymore. We want the kingdom's freedom." One of the men, holding a weapon, said to them both. "What are we going to do with them? Should we execute them?" Another one among the armed citizens asked. "Are you crazy? Planning an execution? Listen to what I'm saying. The world government and the Marines won't stand still watching this. You'll all die, and I myself will execute you. Do you hear me?" the king shouted. "For now, let's imprison them. Take them straight to the castle and put them in the dungeon," said the rebels as they continued taking them. The people of the capital immediately gathered at the port, watching the king being taken down the main street, while he shouted insults and orders to be freed, but no one listened to him. "He deserves death. Execute him." Public lynching. Quickly, several people began to exclaim, making even "Come on, princess of the kingdom," feel anger and fear. "Daddy, they're going to kill us, aren't they?" she murmured. "No, that won't happen, daughter. They'll pay for all of this. I'll sell them as slaves to the Tenri Obitos. I swear I'll make them all pay," he exclaimed. "Let me kill them too," the princess exclaimed, starting to have an enraged face, as her father never lied and did everything for her. After all, she was quite spoiled. But even so, they were carried to the castle, where they were taken to the dungeon. "The Marines will execute all of you. You can't deal with the world government. Get me out of here immediately." They kept shouting, but their captors just looked at each other and walked away, no longer caring about the king, who now ceased to be the monarch of Lulusa. Meanwhile, on the ships that had arrived at the port of Mary Joais, a shadow quickly passed by, without the citizens of Lulusa, who were looting everything on the ships and capturing all of the king's loyalists, as they had already done with all the nobles who supported the regime across the kingdom. Noticing, the shadow moved toward a corner of the city. On top of a house, a man's wife, watching everything happening in surprise. "A revolt is happening here in Lulusa?" he murmured before a smile appeared. "Looks like the oppression in this kingdom is about to end as well," Sabo murmured, having come on one of the king's ships, hidden from his pursuers. After a confrontation inside Mary Joais against the Gorosei, they transformed into beasts. Something he never imagined, all of them having mythical beast fruits. And worst of all was the one on the throne. To think someone occupied the empty throne this whole time. He thought. Luffy was right. Sabo murmured in the end, remembering Luffy's words in Dressrosa. Even so, to confirm, Sabo went to Mary Joais. "There's a king who controls the world government and the world from behind the scenes," Luffy had said. "I must inform Dragon of everything I saw." He decided before choosing a place. He couldn't worry too much about the revolt right now and would help them as soon as he could, but for now he needed to deliver this vital information to the leadership of the revolutionary army. Quickly, he moved forward. There's no doubt. He appeared in the kingdom of Lulusa, just as predicted, Saint Shepherd Jupiter-sama. The man with the white mask said, using a den mushi, in the sky jumping with moonwalk to stay above the clouds and looking directly at the kingdom with a large magnifying glass. There were 2 other agents beside him. "I see." The voice of the Gorosei replied on the other end of the line. "Shall we kill him? We have a chance to catch him by surprise." The Cypher Pol Zero agent asked. "No. I want you to withdraw immediately. We have another plan," the Gorosei said, as the agents nodded and began leaving the location. Meanwhile, the den mushi had been hung up in the Gorosei's room, where they were all gathered. "Seems like the revolt is happening in this kingdom. And to think there was yet another reason to use the mother flame there." Topman Warkuri commented. "Exactly. And Imu-sama already wanted to test the weapon. So the place is perfect? We just need your order," Ethan Bernvinus Jiro said. After all, they had suggested using the weapon on a desert island, but Imu wanted to witness its destruction, and Lulusa was close enough. "Begin." Then a voice suddenly echoed throughout the castle. Thus, everyone looked in silence, as it was the order directly from the king of the world. At the same time, in the garden, a butterfly calmly flapped its wings on the finger of a person with a somber expression, while their red eyes analyzed the insect, having their own thoughts. Attention, G48. I want you to intercept any transmission leaving the island and try to block them. Shepherd Jupiter ordered. The Gorosei in their room were already contacting the nearest marine outpost to Lulusa. Yes, sir. We'll do it. The marine in charge responded quickly. The situation was a bit confusing. He had received a call directly from the Gorosei themselves, which surprised everyone at the base, who quickly began connecting all the radio equipment directly toward the island. Sabo went to the castle and got a denden mushi before heading to another location on the island. Hidden in an abandoned house, he began dialing a new number on the denden mushi. Hello? Hello? A serious voice spoke on the other end. Operation Mary Jo Eyes. Sabo said in code, though his voice was immediately recognized on the other side. Sabo. Another voice emerged from the denden mushi. It was Koala herself, who exclaimed in surprise upon hearing him, near where the government agent had answered the denden mushi. Quick, call Dragon. I need to tell him something urgent I found in Mary Jo Eyes. He requested. All right. Call Dragon. Koala exclaimed to someone outside the room, while Sabo waited, eager to pass on this urgent information, which wouldn't take long. At the same time, the Navy quickly intercepted his call. We got him. Someone exclaimed through the denden mushi in the Gorosei's room. I see. So it's going to begin. Shepherd Jupiter said, while in the garden, the mysterious king of the world, who was still holding the butterfly, stood up and released it, as it flew into the sky. At the same time, the sky over Lulusa began to change. Until that moment it had been a beautiful day, with people working around the kingdom, while in the capital the revolt was underway. Suddenly, everyone noticed dark clouds beginning to circle the atmosphere, blocking any ray of sunlight. The day turned into near total darkness, surprising everyone. Hey, what is that? People murmured, both in the capital and in other parts of the kingdom, looking at the sudden darkness. Why did the weather change like this? Others said, scratching their heads, not understanding if it was a storm. Listen. I was in the room of the empty throne. Sabo began to speak, not seeing the sudden change outside the house, but he could feel that something was wrong. The empty throne. He murmured, while Dragon was already there, along with many members of the Revolutionary Army. Cut the communication. Was the order given in the Gorosei's room to the Marines who were intercepting? What, sir? One of them murmured, not understanding. Didn't you hear? Shepherd Jupiter said in a serious tone. Quickly, the man, frightened by the expression on the denden mushi's face, began cutting all communication from the kingdom to the outside world. The sky began to take on a greenish hue all over the place, as people across the kingdom began to look on and worry. It no longer looked like a simple storm to their eyes, as the green glow continued to spread throughout the island. Daddy. Something up there. A little girl murmured on her father's shoulders, looking toward the center of the sky, where a shadow was starting to appear. Yes. Something there. What is that? Another man murmured, hearing the girl beside him, while people looked more and more worried at the sky. I want you to listen carefully. Shepherd Jupiter began, looking serious, while still in direct communication with the Marines. You never intercepted any communication from Lulusa. He said. The sky suddenly began to shine with the green light stronger than ever, leaving people terrified, knowing that something was about to happen. Daddy. I'm scared. The girl murmured. Quick, let's go home. He grabbed her and began to run with her, while other people also started to flee, looking at the sky that glowed in an abnormal way. All instincts, even without using observation hockey, began to alert both people and animals throughout the kingdom. Some stood still, looking at the light in the sky, covering their eyes with their hands. Others ran. The dogs were frightened, while the animals in the forests around the kingdom tried to flee in any direction. The only ones who had any chance were the birds, flying and heading straight for the sea. Even Sabo looked stunned through the window, as the glow began to illuminate everything, forming a blinding flash before him. Kingdom of Lulusa? Shepherd Jupiter asked. Imu's eyes gleamed with malice at that moment, in the garden. The king and princess of Lulusa also looked frightened through the prison window, knowing that something was very wrong. To begin with, Shepherd Jupiter spoke again. This place doesn't even exist on the map. He replied in a cold tone. In the next moment, explosions began to emerge from the sky, heading directly toward Lulusa. This was the beginning of the end of the kingdom. But, at the same time, someone was advancing at full speed over the sea. While his trail left a massive wave in the water. He advanced straight toward the darkness formed in the sky, dozens of kilometers away, as the green glow could be seen emerging. Luffy was there, flying at full speed, with his black wings spread and flapping, increasing his speed even more with the more fruit model, amplify human devil fruit, while holding two people, one in each arm. Captain. Please, stop. One began to cry, being carried at that speed, his face pressing back with the wind's pressure. "Damned demon!" the other shouted, unable to break free, being gripped by Luffy's hand. And so he approached, in the midst of the chaos. Chapter 511, The Awakening of the Multiplication Fruit. Luffy's advance continued at full speed as he had left his territory after taking two essential people for his plan, none other than Beppo and Enel. He waited in a safe area dozens of kilometers away so as not to be detected by the government, on a giant ship in the sky, with a large lens pipe, taking pictures and filming all the clouds forming above Lulusa, recording what was happening. He had asked his scientists to create equipment capable of zooming in and recording things on the other side of the horizon in ultra-high quality, where that ship had been built. Luffy had to wait for the Mother Flame to be ready to destroy the kingdom, as he would need the footage of it and use it to turn most of the world against the government. It was then, at the last moment, that he left the ship still floating with its engine taking more footage while he was about to change the fate of Lulusa. Using the more fruit model, Amplify Human Devil Fruit and carrying the two members of his crew, Luffy shot through the sea like a lightning bolt, leaving behind a vacuum trail created by his movement that even made the sea move in slow motion as he quickly advanced forward. There were several ships stopped near the island, but at a safe distance. Government ships there to film the attack. He quickly began spitting small fireballs that would rapidly form as they left his mouth and advanced at high speed, destroying more than 15 government ships, vaporizing even the matter itself without leaving a trace. After destroying the ships, he finally approached the dark patch of clouds with red and purple lightning coming down from the sky, starting to strike various parts of the island. Luffy had an incredible processing capacity at that moment. He quickly began scanning every corner of the island from above, near the clouds, as he approached the lightning bolts emerging from them, flying at high speed, seeing people running and feeling all the fear and widespread horror coming from across the island through observation hockey. He had never felt anything like that coming from just one place. No one was an exception to that negative feeling, seeing the glow in the sky and feeling its destruction approaching. He even felt Sabo's voice in a corner of the island, looking up at the sky, stunned, still processing everything that was happening. Luffy passed through a lightning bolt already launched, cutting through it, while all the other lightning bolts moved in slow motion toward the ground due to his hundreds of times increased speed. As he began to descend, heading to the center of the island with multiple lightning bolts following him there, not even Beppo and Enel, who were being pulled by him, could say anything, staring stunned at the entire chaotic scene, still processing everything. Then he reached the central point of the island, before deactivating his wings. He quickly realized he would need to use all his strength for the upcoming abilities. More fruit model, Amplify Human Devil Fruit, Awakening Mode, Apply Time. He quickly began to awaken his fruit, but it wasn't something that happened so quickly at this kind of scale, as he needed to charge the full ability since it would affect all spaces in the area for kilometers around. In the next moment, he threw Beppo and Enel to the ground so they could react, while Luffy's body began to combust. In the following instant, he began to transform into the full effort form, falling through space, creating a great illumination against the greenish sky and the lightning bolts coming from there. Everything happened in milliseconds since he had rushed across the sea. The people who actually managed to perceive what was happening could barely understand it, it was so fast. While in one moment they saw destruction coming from the sky, in the next, a giant red flaming figure appeared crashing into the ground, crushing houses and buildings as it stepped into the city, standing 50 meters tall. Quickly, Ifrit raised both hands and began to create a shield of flames enveloping the entire island. And even though he was still growing, the lightning had already made contact directly at the center of the shield, since Luffy had chosen that exact spot to create it. In the next moment, Luffy in his Ifrit form was being pushed downward, keeping his hands raised, waiting for his more fruit model, Amplify Human Devil Fruit ability to finally take effect. His feet were buried as he destroyed more of the city and the shield continued spreading across the island. Bolt after bolt began to strike directly on the shield as the Mother Flame continued its goal of destroying all of Lulusa. The shield that Luffy had created with the flames of chaos was the only thing preventing the total destruction of the kingdom at that moment. The ability to control time and slow it down to the point of being static was something Luffy had used before. When he entered the New World, the world government launched an attack against his crew and Luffy was able to stop it statically. But, even though it wasn't easy to control, despite already having stopped multiple attacks, hundreds, even thousands of them in an instant, Luffy now wanted to control an entire island, something much more complex. He wanted to control all the space of the island and the government's own weapon. For that reason, he also used his full Ifrit transformation to further increase the range and had to wait a few seconds before it activated. Quickly, people were startled to see the giant standing still after falling from the sky, with lightning from above striking that wall of purple flames and a thin layer around the island. What is happening? People shouted in shock, looking at the giant in the middle of the capital, raising his hands to the sky. "That's Luffy," Sabo murmured, stunned, while the members of the Revolutionary Army who were listening in on the call also froze on the other end of the line upon hearing the name of Dragon's son, just like Dragon himself, surprised that he was in Lulusa. Sabo wasn't just seeing Ifrit in the middle of the island, but also the lightning bolts falling from the sky, advancing everywhere. And only Luffy was stopping them from reaching the entire island. The ground beneath Luffy began to sink even more as he was pushed downward, keeping the shield intact, with the sound of energy striking against his defense echoing in the air. "Damn, this is stronger than I imagined," Luffy murmured, still withstanding the full force of the impact of the Mother Flame. Or rather, what he believed was powered by the Mother Flame created by Vegapunk, one of the three ancient weapons, Uranus. While Luffy struggled to hold his shield, trying to protect the island while also unleashing his more fruit model, Amplify Human Devil Fruit Awakening, Enel and Bippo soon ran to him, confused as they looked up at the attack coming from the sky. "What is this, demon? Who's launching this attack?" Enel asked. "Captain, I don't want to die," Bippo exclaimed in fear, seeing the whole sky glowing and feeling that this could be the end for them. And the only one who could stop them from dying was the captain. While everyone was terrified by what was happening, Luffy stood firm with both hands raised, while his entire body had already buried nearly all his feet into the ground. "And to think that not even I can handle this attack with my shield," Luffy commented. Even the destructive power was above his defense, with the shield beginning to crack at that moment. He could even use the more fruit model, Amplify Human Devil Fruit, to slightly amplify the defense, but he had to save that power for something else. "Don't worry. It's over," Luffy said. And in the next moment, suddenly, all space froze, except for Bippo and Enel, whom Luffy had brought with him. Suddenly, everything became static, as if time had been multiplied by multiple zeros, turning into just a fraction of real time with the power of Luffy's fruit, nearly stopping everything, though still with some movement at 0.00000000001 milliseconds. Either way, Luffy lowered his hands, no longer needing to maintain the block against the Mother Flame's attack, as he could see his shield in the sky across the entire island, cracked on all sides. It was about to be destroyed if it had lasted a little longer. Luffy returned to his normal form, checking the entire island frozen, with people trying to run, looking up at the sky. And he could even see Sabo watching him from that house, through the window. Bippo and Enel were a bit confused. "Well, let's begin. Bippo, you're going to move the island quickly from here?" Luffy asked. "That way, the lightning will hit only the empty sea. Enel, I want you to place these transmitters to block any contact from outside the island and in the sky. I want the government to think it was destroyed or be confused about what happened here." Luffy asked his companions. "All right, Captain," Bippo said, still a little surprised by what was happening there. But he quickly went to the ground of the island. While all the residents were frozen, he began to control the island, which began to shake as it started to rise, leaving the sea, forming a hole in the place where it once stood, since the sea was also static there with Luffy's power reaching it. Bippo had already moved beyond the attack's range after going beneath the shield and began levitating the island, rising into the sky. "Now I want you to block all contact outside the island," Luffy requested, while Enel, despite making a displeased face, grabbed Vegapunk's equipment and began to emit his lightning, which further increased the range. He created a static and magnetic force around the island that blocked any radio signal, as if it were isolated from the outside world. Luffy sighed as he could see from afar the rays of Uranus frozen above the flame shield he had created. The island began to drift away from the sky, rising until it was no longer visible, and he checked that no one had seen it. From the sky, he could see a huge machine above the clouds. "I would have destroyed that now if I could. I'll film it, for now," he murmured, but he couldn't do it at that moment, as he had already used the awakening and a good part of his energy on the shield he created to protect the island. He had never done anything that left him so exhausted in such a short time. One way or another, they moved on, returning to the ship still flying in the air, filming everything that had happened. It would be interesting when the world found out what the world government did there, further stirring up distrust and discord against the regime. In the next moment, when the island was no longer in sight at that location, the shield began to be pressured by the Mother Flame's lightning again as time returned to normal, while it started to crack and break with no more resistance. In the following instant, the attacks advanced toward the sea, which had a huge hole due to the island's removal, hitting quickly. With no land to destroy, it only generated a massive explosion in the middle of the sea. The sky began to open a moment later with lightning and thunder still flashing through the atmosphere, forming a huge hole around where Lulusa would be, but with no sign of the island, as if it had evaporated. "The island has been destroyed," a voice said from inside the Gorosei's room. "I see. It seems to have been a success. The injured Jaga Ursha Saturn commented to the Den Mushi, satisfied. But sir, our report has some wrong and confusing details, one of the men managing the Mother Flame said, rereading the reports. What do you mean? Shepherd Jupiter asked, while the other Gorosei also narrowed their eyes. The attack didn't arrive as we predicted in the system. It's as if it was blocked by something for a few seconds, because here it shows it was launched, but it didn't reach the island instantly like we predicted. It's very confusing, he began, since they had no way of seeing what happened below the weapon during the attack. At the same time, it advanced against the island after that, but destroyed it easily, with no resistance. The soldier said. Here it looks like it hit only water. Maybe the weapon is more powerful than we predicted, and it consumed the land like it was nothing. Marcus Mars suggested. That could be. But we had ships kilometers away. I want to contact them to check. Shepherd Jupiter said. Jupiter-sama, the man murmured again, somewhat hesitant. We've lost contact with all the ships. He said, as all the Gorosei seemed quite surprised by that. Something is happening here. Something is wrong. At the same time, in the garden, the butterfly turned to Imu's hand, but seemed frightened, quickly flying away from her, as her red eyes turned to a corner of the garden, trying to visualize Lulusa directly through those walls, which was now a huge hole in the sea. How strange, the king of the world murmured. He hadn't felt thousands of voices being erased as he had predicted when executing the kingdom. In fact, he hadn't felt any loss of them coming from that island. At the same time, the navy began announcing tidal waves happening around the island, quickly alerting the kingdoms that the sea was quite agitated at that moment. Chapter 512, All Four Siblings, Reunited. Attention all people of the kingdom of Lulusa. Luffy's voice came from the middle of the kingdom. Everyone had returned to normal time, since Luffy had finally undone his awakening, with everyone screaming the next moment, for in their vision was a giant of purple flames releasing energy against another force from just a second ago. However, in a moment following what their brains could process, they were in the middle of the sky, while clouds were everywhere. From just a few meters above them to their sides, at the island's level. The flaming giant disappeared, the energy and the dark sky also gave way to the southern sky, with them much closer than they should be, wondering if the island was flying in the middle of the sky at that moment. It was then that Luffy's voice emerged amidst questions, even asking if they were dead and had been sent to the sky alongside the gods. And Luffy continued, to explain what was happening. Your kingdom has just been attacked by the world government, with the intention of exterminating the entire kingdom. He spoke, delivering a great shock to everyone who was listening, immediately showing horrified faces upon hearing this. It can't be. They murmured, stunned. The government wanted to exterminate us? What madness is this? That thing in the sky was meant to kill us? Luffy. You can't be serious, right? People quickly began raising confused questions throughout the kingdom while embracing family members or falling to the ground from the impact of this statement, with even Sabo looking at Luffy from a distance without knowing how to react. Sabo looked at the now disconnected Den Mushi, and quickly left that house, his body surrounded by purple lightning, shooting toward where Luffy was. I know it's hard to believe. But the world government wanted to test a weapon on Lulusa to see the impact. As you saw, I found out about this attack in advance and came with the intention of stopping it and saving the entire kingdom. Fortunately, along with 2 companions, we managed to move the island without the world government noticing. I'm now moving the kingdom to my territory, for obvious reasons. As you may already know, I am the Admiral of the Pirates of the Dawn, and also the most wanted pirate in the world. I'll leave you some time so you can process everything that just happened and spend time with your companions, family, and friends. Luffy said calmly, still in the sky, while Depot was jumping using moonwalk nearby and Enel appeared with his lightning as he floated motionless in the air. Luffy could feel various emotions spreading throughout the kingdom, while fear was still visible in everyone. They would need some time to think about what had happened, and now Luffy had another person to deal with, as another lightning bolt advanced toward them. But it was purple, it was Sabo himself. Luffy. Sabo approached him, while his ability allowed him to remain static in the air as well. Hello Sabo. You were in serious trouble, huh? Luffy smiled. Luffy. What? How? Sabo murmured. Let's go down there, we can talk better. Luffy said as they moved somewhere in the country while discussing everything that had happened. So they really wanted to do that? Because I was here. Sabo murmured, lost, feeling guilt for it too. Don't blame yourself, it's more complex than that. Luffy said calmly. Sabo still seemed lost. Imu was the one who ordered that attack, the one you saw on the empty throne. Do you know if he's a man or a woman? Luffy asked. After all, Sabo had seen the king of the world. I don't know. I couldn't see, His voice was also distorted. He said without coming out of his shaken state. He was interested in whether Imu was a man or a woman, but it seemed it wouldn't be so easy to find out. Wait, you said Imu? How do you know the name? Sabo had heard it from the Gorosei, but Luffy shouldn't know that information. Long story. Anyway, we're heading to my territory, we'll have plenty of time to talk, so relax a bit. Luffy said as he left the place. He headed to the center of the capital once again, as the people were gathering with him approaching with his transformed wings, arriving close and landing in the square with the entire population still seeking answers. Luffy explained the situation. Although there were people who didn't want the path he chose for the kingdom, or even disbelieved his words, they were the minority, and the scenes in the sky. Anyway, Luffy sped up the island's journey, and they arrived in the territory a day later. Bippo took Lulusa directly to Skypiea under Luffy's orders, able to hide the kingdom for a while, with the government possibly confused about what had happened. On one hand, they knew something was wrong. After all, they had the time when the weapon was fired from Mary Jo Eyes, which wouldn't match the data from the weapon itself, with Luffy's devil fruit having frozen time. On the other, they had no idea who could do something like this. Luffy would clearly be suspected given his past actions against the government, but it would still be confusing. After all, no one was supposed to know about this operation. Luffy explained a few more things to the people of Lulusa while keeping the king still imprisoned, and said they should choose and debate the kingdom's future among themselves, but they were now safe and Luffy declared the kingdom as his territory with no one able to say otherwise. Look what we have here. Luffy didn't fail to visit the king and the princess in the castle dungeon at that moment. What? You're him? Obviously, fear took over the king, seeing Luffy and Sabo on the other side of the bars. I heard you were going to be saved by the government and navy, don't you think that's funny? Luffy didn't hold back from mocking this character. You. The government will save me. He still insisted on that while Luffy wanted to hit him. You're still insisting on that? You're a complete idiot when the very government tried to kill you and destroy your entire kingdom. I mean, ex-kingdom, after all your family won't rule anymore and your own people will choose a new ruler or turn the kingdom into a democracy, who knows? Luffy shrugged, while the king looked a bit stunned by those words. Wait. You can't be serious. The princess shouted, quite angry. I'm the most powerful pirate in the world, do you really believe someone from the government can do anything against me? Luffy left that question hanging in the air as they seemed terrified to hear it. Wait, then make me queen, I'll marry you, and you let me rule. The woman exclaimed suddenly. No. Luffy said. I already have way too many women, maybe I'll still try to get a giantess in Elbaf if she's really attractive. Anyway, you're not even pretty and I'm not interested in having more women right now. Luffy replied, breaking the princess. Then I'm off, good luck living in prison. He said and started leaving with Sabo after speaking to the guards. Onel deactivated the device as they left the island, with Bippo keeping it close to the islands around Skypiea, asking Ganful to look after Lulusa in case it needed anything. He would fly there with his horse, and the same applied to the people themselves, who had Dendenmushi to speak directly with the central network of Luffy's pirates, passing messages to him and filtering important information. I'm fine. I'll stay in Luffy's territory then. Sabo resumed communication through the Dendenmushi, speaking directly to his companions while briefly explaining what had happened. Tell my father to bring the people I asked for. Since he was supposed to bring them a few weeks ago, he should also come personally to negotiate the alliance. Luffy said to Sabo, who passed the information to the Dendenmushi. Alright. Dragon said through the Dendenmushi. Anyway, Sabo hung up and they began descending from the clouds to sea level, passing by more floating islands below Skypiea, while the entire territory around Wano was visible on that sunny day. Let's pick up Lucy first and then we'll meet up with Ace. Luffy said, while Sabo nodded. He found Lucy in a restaurant in Alabasta eating dozino, bankrupting the restaurant, while Luffy arrived with Sabo, saying goodbye to Bippo and Enel, going to reunite the four brothers after so long. Sabo. She screamed, hugging Sabo while Luffy placed a pile of money for the food Lucy had consumed. After that, they went to see Ace, with his crew back in Sphinx, settling there as his base. Sabo. Ace was stunned seeing Sabo standing there while Luffy and Lucy were also present. Ace. Sabo approached his brother, giving him a hug. A real reunion, after all they had only spoken via Dendenmushi. They went to a part of the territory, an island without human civilization and only giant animals, while they talked, drank, and ate. To think we're all together again. Lucy exclaimed, eating meat. Yeah. I remember everything that happened back when we lived in the Goa Kingdom. Now here we are, all wanted by the government, can you believe it? Sabo said, laughing with tears. It's something we always said, fighting over who would get the highest bounty. Or rather, at least three of us, since Lucy used to say she'd be a marine and would turn us in. Luffy laughed saying that. It's true, today she's a pirate with a bounty of 3 billion. Ha 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 ha. Ace exclaimed, looking very much like Shanks as he hit the ground, finding it hilarious. Damn, it's true, but I'm still doing my justice. She murmured, pouting. You'll still do a lot of justice, sister. Luffy said, drinking sake. After all, we're going to create a force similar to the Navy soon. He said with a smile. What? The three of them looked at him at that moment. We'll talk about that later. Luffy left it mysterious. First, I'm waiting for my grandfather to show up in the kingdom, he said in a calm tone, while the three there made faces. Grandpa? That old man? Garp? They exclaimed, not having many good memories besides getting beaten a lot by the Vice Admiral when they were kids in the Goa Kingdom. Anyway, let's leave that aside, let's remember those times when we got into trouble back in the Goa Kingdom. Luffy said. Yes. I remember that time Luffy went into that big mansion's room and then ran off with a naked woman, that was so funny. Lucy started laughing while the others looked at each other. There was a case when Luffy was 12 years old and had an affair with a noblewoman from the Goa Kingdom. Her husband found out and they had to run away. Luffy coughed. After all, Lucy was too clueless to understand that. Even Sabo and Ace were stunned hearing it, making the biggest grimaces they could that day. Lucy almost told Garp, and that clearly would have caused Luffy's death, so they did everything they could to cover Lucy's mouth during that visit. I think it's better we drop that and talk about other things. Luffy said nervously. After all, his sister was innocent and he didn't want her to lose that too soon. She was only 19 to him, maybe when she was 80, Luffy would let her get a boyfriend. Anyway, the conversations continued as they exchanged various stories from their time, spending the next few hours there, all four of them reunited.